5 years after Meghan Markle stepped away from palace gates and into what was framed as independence, the question isn't whether she found freedom, it's what she did with it. The protocols vanished, the schedule loosened, the spotlight, if anything, got brighter. She could have authored her own mission statement in public, global initiatives, sustained partnerships, a measurable arc of work. Instead, the loudest sound has often been the quiet. Not a crusade, not a blueprint, a curated image, a few high-production moments, and long stretches of strategic silence. Freedom, it turns out, is a test. And freedom keeps score. When Meghan first arrived, the coverage wrote itself. Side-by-side photo spreads, echoes of Diana in hemlines, silhouettes, even the tilt of a head during a hospital reception line. The new Diana, some tabloids suggested. Headlines engineered to travel further than facts. It was a tidy narrative, and it sold. But time is merciless. What began as tribute in the public imagination shifted for many watchers into a performance they struggled to believe. The difference is simple: walking a path versus dressing up in it. Behind the scenes, if you believe the whispers that have followed for years, there was a firmer boundary taking shape. William, future king, protector of his mother's memory, was said to have drawn a clear line. The claim goes like this: Meghan would not be wearing Diana's personal pieces. Not the rings, not the necklaces, and certainly not the famous gold Cartier watch. The reasoning, according to those accounts, wasn't petty. It was protective. Legacy, in William's worldview, is earned and safeguarded, not staged and syndicated. Whether you agree or not, this is the spine of the story insiders have pushed for half a decade. The jewelry is more than metal. It is memory. Then came a detail that hardened opinions. For months, glossy coverage floated the idea that Meghan had worn Diana's watch in a handful of appearances. Cropped photos, soft focus. A deliberate angle that gave viewers just enough to believe. The symbolism was potent. A daughter-in-law carrying a mother-in-law's timepiece into a new era. But according to several royal watcher accounts, corrections trickled out later, quietly, surgically. The watch, they said, wasn't Diana's. It wasn't authentic at all. Not everyone buys that version. Not every outlet corrected it. Still, the notion landed. If the image was doing the heavy lifting, then authenticity mattered more than ever. That's where William's reputed resolve crystallized. Not in a press conference, not in a sweeping on-the-record statement. In something subtler, a steady refusal to let his mother's private artifacts drift into the swirl of branding. He didn't blink, say those close to the palace orbit. He didn't barter memory for a piece that wouldn't last. The message was intended to travel without fanfare. Diana's legacy belongs first to the life she lived, not to the narratives others would like to pin to it. This isn't just about a watch, of course. It's about what jewelry means inside. That family. Continuity. Duty. A chain of trust you do not cut for spectacle. Catherine wears Diana's pieces, and the photographs barely need captions. They register as lineage, not theater. Years of quiet service add weight to a bracelet. Steadiness turns a sapphire into a sentence you can read without words. You can disagree with the monarchy and still understand the grammar it speaks. In that grammar, symbols are earned. Meghan's project has always been different. More California than court circular, more brand deck than balcony. There's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. It just operates on a different logic. Influence measured by impressions. Impact framed by partnerships. Attention always. as the raw material. But the risk of building in the language of image is that substance must arrive on schedule. If it doesn't, the gap between promise and product becomes the story, and critics don't have to shout, they just have to point. The pottery scene on Netflix, sleeves rolled, camera framing the wrist, became a litmus test for exactly this dynamic. No one said Diana's watch on camera. It didn't need to be said. The implication hovered in the shot like perfume. For admirers, it read as a tender nod. For skeptics, it looked like the latest in a string of visual winks designed to keep the Diana parallel alive without ever staking a claim that could be fact-checked. When some royal reporters later insisted the watch was not authentic, the debate hardened into a familiar trench. Supporters called it an overreaction. Critics called it a tell. The truth is that the audience had already made up its mind about the larger pattern, and patterns, once set, are difficult to dislodge. Layered on top of all this is a more uncomfortable idea: that Meghan didn't just echo Diana's wardrobe, but Diana's aura, hair, posture, the choreography of public tenderness. Until admiration, read as mimicry. That's the part that unsettled even neutral observers. Not because tribute is forbidden, but because there's a line between living in memory and living off of it. When Catherine steps into a children's hospice or a military family center, the camera often records two things at once: the work and the silence around it. The visit ends, and there is no podcast episode, no merch tease, no carefully placed teaser photo crafted to keep speculation humming. The narrative breathes on its own. It's not glamorous. It doesn't trend, but it accumulates. The great irony is that Meghan had, and still has, the raw materials to chart a different course entirely. She can convene rooms. She can pull headlines on command. She can fundraise with a phone call. The problem, as critics tell it, is cadence. Initiatives appear, then go quiet. Partnerships launch, then pivot. Promises land before planning. And into that space, comparison walks in uninvited. Diana's life wasn't tidy, but the public remembers a through line. The HIV ward handshakes, when fear stigmatized touch. The landmine walk, when policy hid behind euphemisms. The relentless visits without fanfare. No one doubts that imagery was powerful. It just wasn't the point. What about Harry in all this? For a long time, he was the loudest custodian of Diana's memory. Blunt, protective, unflinching. Now, the loudest thing is often his silence. Maybe it's strategy. Maybe it's fatigue. Maybe it's the cost of loving people who are criticized hourly by an industry that never sleeps. Silence isn't evidence, it's absence. But absence has its own gravity. When the conversation turns to who steers his mother's legacy, and he isn't the one at the wheel, or even on the radio, the public writes its own caption. Of course, none of these themes exist in a vacuum. They collide with harsher accusations that when pushback arrives, race is invoked as a shield rather than a context, that criticism is rebranded as persecution, that error becomes misunderstanding, and correction becomes targeting. There's no denying that bias shaped parts of Meghan's coverage, often ugly, sometimes explicit. It's also true that not every critique is bigotry wearing a better suit. The truth lives in the mess between those poles. And that's the mess legacy guardians like William insist on navigating quietly, carefully, relentlessly. He will not let his mother's belongings become content, say those who claim to know his thinking. He will not politicize them, and he will not commercialize them. If that sounds rigid, consider the alternative, a symbol unmoored from meaning, drifting wherever the algorithm takes it. The tug-of-war over Diana's pieces also exposed an awkward reality most families understand. Inheritance is never just about objects. It's about authority. Who decides? Who interprets? Who carries? The romantic story that Harry gave William the engagement ring for Catherine makes lovely copy. It's also largely mythology. The elder son was always going to set the terms. That's not a moral triumph. It's a structural fact, written into the DNA of the institution long before any of them were born. Meghan's reported anger at being walled off from the jewelry reads, in that light, as a collision not just with William's will, but with the monarchy's operating system. Could all of this have unfolded differently? Imagine an alternate timeline where Meghan chose one pillar, a global literacy initiative, maternal health in underserved communities, girls' education routed through steady local partners, and built it brick by brick over 5 years. Fewer rollouts, more receipts, fewer glossy teasers, more measurable outcomes. The comparison to Diana might still be made, but it would land in a different register. Not costume, but continuation. Not mimicry, but momentum. Instead, we're left with two conflicting stories that refuse to merge. In one, Meghan is a modernizer stifled by tradition, forced to craft her own stage after being denied a fair one. In the other, she is a stylist of narratives who prefers the aura of impact to the grind of it, and who reaches for Diana's glow when her own case is thin. The truth may borrow from both, as truths often do, but Diana's watch, real or rumored, became the perfect proxy. It asks a blunt question: are you wearing time, or are you honoring it? There's a reason Catherine's approach draws less heat even when the work is slow. She doesn't chase the camera chases the calendar. The itinerary fills with hospitals and early years roundtables and military engagements that generate no viral moment and no instant brand halo. It's not exciting, it's consistent. And consistency over time is how inheritances stop being curiosities and become responsibilities lived in public. If you strip away the headlines, the etiquette, the outrage, and the conspiracy, what remains is elemental. Legacy is a vote taken daily. It can't be worn into existence. It can't be implied by a crease of a sleeve and the glint of a gold case framed just so. It's heavy. It's humbling. It's earned by repetition. That's why William is immovable on the point, if the reports are to be believed. The jewelry is not a costume department. It's a reliquary. It belongs to the proof of a life and to the people who keep that proof from becoming a prop. Meghan's defenders will say she was never given a fair shot. That suspicion preceded her, that the palace wanted a mannequin while she wanted a microphone. There's truth to some of that, too. Institutions as old as kingdoms aren't famous for flexibility. But fairness and follow-through are separate tests. You can be disadvantaged by the first and still accountable to the second. If the product rarely matches the pre-release, audiences notice. If the image always arrives before the work, audiences remember. 5 years on, the stakes are clearer than ever. The story is no longer about a piece of gold, however famous. It is about stewardship versus spectacle, about whether a legacy is guarded or monetized, about the difference between nodding to the past and using it as a ladder. And in that argument, William's voice, quiet, steady, stubborn, carries far without ever needing to shout. He is not competing for applause. He is guarding a door. As for the watch, it will keep telling the time no matter who wears it, or pretends to. That's the thing about time. It doesn't care for edits. The hours will add up across hospital corridors and school visits and military reunions. They will add up across production meetings and brand shoots and podcast studios. 2. But only one of those ledgers will feel like legacy to the people who decide how these stories endure. In the end, the real jewels were never behind velvet or glass. They were the habits that become a life. Showing up, staying late, returning without fanfare. Truth, dignity, loyalty. Those are heirlooms you cannot counterfeit. If Meghan truly wants them, they are still there to be earned, the way Diana earned the world's attention one unguarded act at a time. If not, the illusion will keep flickering until the audience stops squinting and starts turning away. And perhaps that is why, in this telling, the ban, if it was a ban, matters less than the boundary. Not everything in a family can be borrowed. Not every memory can be monetized. Not every echo is an inheritance. The camera can catch a glint. It cannot confer a legacy. That work is slower, quieter, and infinitely harder, which is exactly why it lasts.